I actually now wish I would have said camels or something like that.
Yeah, you could have.
But the goats are fine. Yeah.
Bah.
There we go. And we're
I
off.
know. We're off. That was a bad idea. I couldn't help it. I got an animal noise and a dad joke all out at the same time. How cool was that?
It's terrible.
It is. But I embrace the terrible.
Entry music. Da, 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 da. It's the Bob and Josh Show.
Big news. We have a chatbot. What in the world would you need a chatbot for, Metacast? Simple. We can't be there when you need us every time. But now, for a small monthly fee, because it took some effort to get this to happen, you can ask us anything, anytime. We've loaded up every episode we have, over 1.5 million words, mostly Bob. I know we're all saying that, into a chatbot that you can ask any question, anytime, any day, and it will extract all of the information, all of the knowledge from all of our episodes and give you the best answer possible. I can't think of anything better than that. So for just a couple coffees or monsters, if you're me, you can have access to Bob and I 24/7. Even bigger news, it's Memorial Day. So that means everybody has sales. That means us also. You get 75% off your first month. That's $5. You can try anything for $5. You can't even get a burrito for that. $5 gets you Metacast in your pocket 24/7, 365. Give it a shot and then give us feedback because we want to make this thing great. Greater. We know it's great. We want to make it like great, 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 great. All right, on to the episode.
Backlog refinement. What is it?
Yeah, yeah.
What is it? That's not, we're done with the we can't talk about Prince. Come on, let it go. Let it go.
Okay.
Let it go. Purple rain.
Well, no, you can't do that.
I can.
No, you can't say
I'm
let
on the
it go.
hey,
I'm on the
hey, I'm on the left side today.
I can change that.
I know you
can be
can.
fixed.
But the universe has conspired to allow me the left, to put me on the left. So backlog refinement.
Yeah.
What is it? What isn't it? Is it something else? Is it broader and deeper than we think it is? So let's talk about backlog refinement. So you start. You know what? You turned into a product guy over the years. I mean, I'm not trying to pigeonhole you, but when we first met, when I pigeonholed Josh Anderson, you were like a DevOps tool guy. When we first met, you were configuration management ish stuff, tooling stuff. And so I was younger then and sort of silly. I sort of marginalized you into Josh is a DevOps guy. Then development, but then product.
Yeah.
So you
been
have
a huge piece.
been a huge part. So backlog refinement, reactions.
To me, backlog refinement is like eating your vegetables.
Ooh.
If you want a strong, healthy organization.
Oh my God, are you no, keep going, please. I love the metaphor.
You have to eat your vegetables, and the companies that are good at the vegetables win. When I get hired to come in and evaluate an agile team or whatever it might be, that's the first place I go. A, do they do it? B, if they do it, what does it look like? Is it healthy? Is it actually achieving anything? There's a lot of times, a lot of places I've been where there's a refinement and it doesn't resemble anything that I've ever tried to generate as refinement. But that's the thing. Those companies, those departments, those teams that regularly eat their vegetables and have a really good refinement session on a regular basis, those are the good ones. You walk in, you see that, you're like, okay, they're in pretty darn good shape. There's not going to be a lot that needs to be tweaked, but that tells you a lot about what that is. And again, staying with the vegetable theme, you can have the vegetable that's like corn or potatoes that everybody eats, like this guy. Uh, but we're talking about if you have really good vegetables, if you have the broccoli, you have the cauliflower, you have things like that. So you're really invested in doing that. Just like in life, it's gonna lead towards really good health.
You know what happened to me just now, Josh?
What
I'm smirking. I'm smirking.
I
Your
noticed.
your head turned into a Brussels sprout just in my mind, just for a second.
That's the only food I've ever had where I had a gag reflex, Brussels
Oh my
sprouts.
oh, Brussels sprouts are I mean, I'm sure I'm cooking them poorly. Right.
I don't think
Uh,
there's anything you do to make them good, but
I don't know. But you were a damn handsome sprout there for a sec
thank
for
you.
a second.
Thank you.
I I agree with you on the so I forget who Rock Bar said something like, "Yes, but not how most companies do it." That's my one observation I have, when I'm coaching, it's an entry point for me. Backlog refinement is one of those really powerful entry points for me as a coach. If I can navigate, if I can convince people to invite me, is to attend and watch uh, their refinement. And I don't mean to sound like the wizard of what good looks like with refinement. I have my own version of what good looks like. We might want to explore it together here. But but a lot of people are not they're missing refinement. So for example, they look at it, what does bad look like? Just estimating stories, um, and getting to points, trying to either spend an hour beating a user's story to death, or not spending any time on it at all. Once you get the number, once you have global thermonuclear agreement on the number, you just move on,
Yep.
right? So there's no conversation. It's a tactical exercise. Uh, one
Usually
person,
done by like a couple people. Like I've seen like a
yeah,
PO and a scrum master
or a
refine the
technical
backlog.
lead or
Yeah.
something, right?
Yeah.
It's everyone looks to Josh. What number do you have, Josh? And
Yeah.
everyone, so it's there's a director. That's really bad. It's
No,
not this
no,
collaborative.
I am talking I've seen it where it's religiously 2 people.
Oh,
Forget the whole
just
team, like, the whole team's not even
yeah,
there. They're just like, "We're
yeah,
gonna refine the
yeah.
backlog," and I look around in the meeting like, "What
And
are we
it's
doing?"
under the banner of we're saving the team time,
Yeah,
very often.
always.
So
Yeah, you're
I'm
right.
just giving those are areas of like bad, you know, but it gives me an indication of that.
Mhm,
So, for example, if there's 2 people doing it, you get a realization culturally
mhm,
that it's very command and control. Again, not judging it, it's command and control.
mhm.
Folks look at teams as being producers of stuff. So outcomes are important. So it's giving you an indication of that. Even forget that the team, even if the team is there, if the entire team is there, I've seen developers talking and testers like keeping their little heads down and just agreeing
Yeah,
with whatever and not providing like their perspective or
mhm.
UX folks not providing their perspective. But it's this wonderful, rich I'm gonna land it this way. I think backlog for a coach is a window into culture, is a window into the product, a window into the technology, right? And a window into the culture.
Mhm.
And it's invaluable, if you're trying to understand the context that you're in.
Yeah,
React to
it's
anything I
it's
said.
it that's why when I'm engaged with a new company, that's the first place I go is like, okay, let me see refinement. And they're like, what are you talking about? That's like, oh boy. And then like, yeah, we have it. And then again, depending on the health. Now, interestingly enough, I've never been hired by a company. And Bob, this is a question for you. Have you ever been hired by a company to do coaching where refinement was already in a healthy spot? I have not. In fact, I have most often been hired in to help companies coach themselves out of a tough spot. And the most consistent trait is refinement doesn't exist at all.
I would I rarely I'm trying to I do not remember a time when it was done, and I'm not talking about perfectly or in Bob Galen's,
Hmm.
according to whatever rules I have. I'm
Hmm.
just talking about I'm looking at refinement, I'm like, "Wow, interesting, that's pretty good." I don't know if that's ever happened to me. at all. I think I agree with you. Another anti-pattern that you brought up that I've seen a lot is they're not doing it at all, right? It's because it's a waste of time, right? People look at it
Yeah.
as a waste. It's just a waste. I'm not going to waste the team's time. So they're not, or they're doing it so quickly, or it's really they're not doing it at all. So I see that a lot. It's usually an anti-pattern thing. I've probably written a lot. You're gonna hate. I've written some posts, like what does good refinement?
Mhm.
Several, and maybe we attach them to this episode, just because of that. I think organizations don't understand the basics of it. In my product owner book, I have a chapter, at least no, I know I have a chapter on refinement, but I know I talk around it, like what healthy refinement. And I'm not trying to give folks a recipe, but like we talked about, what would be a healthy attribute? Team collaboration, for goodness sakes. Uh, Using story points and estimation as a driver for understanding the story, as opposed to just getting a number so we can pin it on the team's forehead and hold them accountable to it. Things like that. Sort of getting everyone's voice. Um, as a coach, oh, go.
Just can let's take that and let's lean into it because I think this is one of the things where you and I naturally see it and feel it. So let's talk about that healthy backlog refinement and what that tells us about culture, right? Like we said, oh, it's a window into culture. If I'm out there listening, I might be like, Bob, what the hell does that mean? Like, what in the world are you talking about? I think it's probably worthwhile because we've talked about story pointing, we've
It,
talked about
yeah.
refinement. There are episodes that are out there, but this is one of those things that you and I both believe in pretty heavily. Again, we talked about like that's where we start. Let's talk about what that translates to and that how that helps you create a healthy overall culture by just doing one meeting well.
Well, forget even the backlog. Let's talk about diversity. Let's talk about diversity and inclusion.
Mhm.
And that's important from a cultural perspective. So do all voices matter? And do all voices have the opportunity to talk? So
Is it
I
a
was
safe
joking,
space, right?
is it a safe space? So as a new hire, do they feel, not even is it okay? Are they welcomed to
Yeah.
provide their insights, even if they don't have even if they provide a stupid idea because they don't know the code base? Is it like, wow, thank you for the how are they? So is it a diverse and inclusive environment? Uh, Men, women, are women's voices as important? Are people of color, are they included in that? You can see that depending on the dynamics, ages. You and I joke so much about we have I do it. We have generational differences, but all joking aside, like very often old folks are marginalized. It's like Bob is over 60. I wonder if his brain is still working. So we probably don't want to listen to his ideas. Uh, Instead of flipping it around. So
Yeah.
you can get, and I'm not talking about gross, we need to bring HR into backlog refinement. I'm talking about the fine-tuning aspects of, do you have a respectful culture? Do you have an inclusive culture? Do you have an experiment-oriented culture? Do you have a risk, an embracing of risk culture? And you can see that.
Yeah, there's another cultural piece that often shows the silos that are within a company, and that's just do all roles have an equal voice? You talked about QA so often being quiet. But do you get a QA person that speaks up and is like, "Hey, this needs to be bigger because of X, Y, and Z," and do people like brush it off, or they're like, "Oh, dang, you're right. We should add a couple points because this is going to be an absolute bear to test because we don't have a harness for that yet."
Exactly. There's some things there, if one person throws out the size and everyone just agrees.
Yeah,
So you can see, I don't know if it's safety or it's just complacency, and it could be interrelated, but sometimes teams are just not motivated or they're complacent, right? It's just, I'm not going to weigh in for whatever reason.
yeah,
Safety is a dynamic of that.
yeah.
He said if QA doesn't speak up, does someone push that conversation?
Right.
Or I don't know about push, but encourage, invite, right? When I'm in a scrum master role, I'm very proactive in getting all voices engaged, even if folks are uncomfortable. right? I'm not trying to reduce safety, but I'm like, I would really want to hear, I want to hear QA voices because, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'll throw myself under the bus. I think that is a bear to test, and I haven't heard it. It's a 3-point story, and no one has talked about testability. No
Mhm.
one has talked about performance testability. No one has talked about data sets, how much effort we're going to have to put together to put data sets together to test that. So can we hear some of that stuff? So I'm teeing that up, and I'm putting myself out there because
Yeah.
it's not just test. It's me. So talk me out of it. Tell me I'm stupid,
Mhm.
and it's not a worry or whatever. But to get that, ORSC, we talked in the Metacast before about ORSC coaching is a coaching program, and I love their term. It's called deep democracy.
Mm.
Deep democracy is getting. It's just what resonates in my mind. We're trying to get backlog refinement should engage deep democracy, which it's not the democracy part, it's the all voices part, right? It's very inclusive and it's continuously. And if we're getting the culture right, the team is doing that themselves. I think that's what Stephen is, someone on the team doing that. Josh, you froze again. Stephen, if you're hearing me, Stephen, I agree with you. Sometimes you can broach it on their behalf until they start seeing it. What you're doing there is creating safety for it, Stephen. Right? Or creating this. So I think of it as creating the space for that conversation. So I think that's an important part. I do think a lot of coaches, so it's a window. Backlog refinement is a window into culture, but if you flip it, or that almost implies like you're looking through the window and you're watching. And that, as a coach, it's useful for that. But flip it around when you're in backlog refinement as a participant, independent of your role, it's a wonderful place to influence the culture. And that's some of the stuff that Steven's talking about is you can role model. You can not just talk about deep democracy, but you can show what it looks like. You can role model what that looks like. You can take a risk to create the safety for that stuff in the team. You're not going to get I don't think you get a miracle change in one refinement session, but over time, it can fundamentally shift the culture just from that one event. Anything else? Take us in another direction around refinement, if you have one.
I think something that is interesting to talk about would be, when do you consider it refined, and what does that look like? There's a lot of definitions. You and I probably have different definitions, but that's always one of those things that new teams struggle with, is what does done look like for refinement? When do I
Like,
say this is good enough? Like, okay, let's move on. It's ready for sprint.
well, there's that readiness criteria. There's a lot of debate in the agile community around. I like ready criteria or
Mhm.
readiness criteria as a mini checklist. A lot of people, sort of judge that, and a lot of sort of very senior people like Mike Cohn. Well, I think he may lean into it a little bit, but a lot of pundits have different opinions. I like it, and so to me, one of the advantages of readiness, and it's not too strict. So it's not,
Yeah.
we have global agreement on the points, or the story has achieved 8,252 words. It's not ready until it's not that kind of readiness, but light readiness to say, is this ready to enter the sprint or to enter the iteration? And that doesn't mean that everything is known. So part of readiness, I like using percentages like we know enough. We know roughly 50%. We have 50% clarity of the story. So we have confidence that we can enter the sprint and we can exit the sprint with it.
Yeah.
Something like that. So
I
readiness criteria. But the other thing, real quickly,
yeah.
there's ready to enter, but there's also how much to refine as you were
Mhm.
talking about it, like what is the runway? How
Yeah.
many things to refine ahead? So refining it, readiness, is it ready for prime time? And then how many of those things do we need to have in our hands?
I have very strong opinions about that, as I since I've been labeled the product guy now by Mr. Galen.
You are.
What I know, and that's where I spend most of my coaching these days, is getting the product side of the house healthy. The key word you said in defining when it's ready for sprint is confidence. And that's always the question that I ask of the team is, okay, is this at a point where any one of us could confidently grab this story off the top of the backlog and start working on it? If not, then we have a little bit more to do, and that's
Yeah.
tough for new folks because it's like, what does that mean? But you get there over a certain number of sprints as you test that out and figure out your what does AC look like? Do you want to do tasks? Like I know Bob's a big task guy and I'm not, but do you want to predefine those? Or do you want to work on those? What that's not an insult. It's just that
It
you are a
was.
task guy.
No, it was the way you couched it.
Oh,
It hurt my heart.
this is a safe space, Robert. I'm not couching
Oh,
anything.
okay.
How dare
Oh,
you?
all right. It's
Uh,
still
as far as it's okay, but I'm not really going to forgive you. uh, as far as the runway, I've found 2 to 3 sprints of fully refined, ready to rock and roll stories. What what was that, Bob?
I don't
What was
know.
that? Did
I
you
think it
just
was
mimic me talking a lot?
oh no, don't.
Are
Are you
you
proud?
serious? Are you serious? Did you
No,
just do what I think you did?
no.
I'm
My hand.
sorry, viewers and listeners, but this is something that I gotta slam the brakes on.
All right.
That's like
I,
that's
wait,
just
hold it, hold it. Can I apologize?
no. The deed is done.
I had a momentary senior moment. I don't even recall what I was doing.
Don't give me that crap. I've got the video, I can remind you.
Yeah, over and over, over and over again.
In
Uh,
fact, that's gonna be a social media
no,
post.
don't, please
It is,
don't.
it's gonna be a social media post. Yeah.
You energized me so much I couldn't control my hands,
Don't
Josh.
try
So,
that crap with me.
please move on, please.
No.
Please
Uh,
cut me some slack.
I will be happy to get back on topic, sir. Happy to. 2 to 3 sprints is that magic number for me because what that shows me is that that team really is at that confidence level, and you can only get to that confidence, real confidence in the work that you're going to do when you're not doing what I call just in time planning. And if you're always refining what's next, it is going to be impossible for you to have confidence in everything that you pull in because there is undoubtedly going to be a story or something out there that people don't have that last bit of clarity that needs a
Yeah.
little bit of work, whatever it is. If it's, oh, we should probably do a research spike, but like, oh, we don't have time, so we're just gonna, it's like that famous video of like, we're gonna do it live. Uh, so that's where you get into trouble. And so that's what I define as a really healthy organization has 2 to 3 sprints of like really well refined, ready to rock and roll stories. When I see that, or when I've helped generate that, then it's like my work is done here. And I can ride off into the sunset and go find another uh, company that doesn't have a backlog and try and fix that.
I mean, I might say yes and though, Josh, that it's not for every company. So I think it depends on some things. So going back to what you said, one of the indicators of poor refinement is I've actually gone into companies and they refine right before the sprint. So they have no look ahead. They have zero look ahead. And the day before they commit to a sprint or even in even in sprint planning, they're actually refining. So they're coupling planning with refinement, which is
Right.
can be really ugly if you actually want to deliver, understand what you're biting off. So to me, that's like zero look ahead. So that is very dangerous. I think having what 20 sprints in the bag or 10 sprints in the bag
Right.
is really dangerous. Now,
It's
there's a
wasteful.
it's wasteful. I love that. I think of it it's exactly the same. From a lean point of view, it's just waste. Now, I don't think there's a magic number though, because I think it depends on your culture and your company and like your road mapping and things like that. So I'm going to hate myself later, but I'm going to say in safe, in safe environments where we're doing release trains, then the runway needs to sort of map to the release train tempo, which may be beyond 2 or 3 sprints. And you may be generating, and you may look at it as waste, but you have to tolerate that waste, right? Because you're going to have a lot of turbulence because you're going to be grooming. Ooh, you're going to be refining ahead too much. But so it's like finding that sweet spot is what I think it is. If you had a really major release with new technology, I might argue that if your normal look ahead is 2 sprints, you might want to get 3 or 4 sprints ahead for maybe just for the team to have some confidence in their understanding of architecture. Just once, John. You know what I'm saying? It's like you might want to not have a fixed number all the time. There might be some constraints, but you really need to be waste aware, right? On both sides. What do you think?
I am going to stare
Disagree. You're going to
with
disagree
steely eyes and
violently.
abnormally confident chin and, and say, no, 2 to 3 is the answer. And here's
Damn.
why I believe that as an indicator and a place to go, because to get there, you have to do all of the pre-work that has to happen to make it so that you can have that refined and ready to go. So having the architectural research done up front, driven by chapters or whatever SAFe says or whatever
Yep.
it is, whatever
Yep.
label it is, that you have that nice flow of work from the broader annual roadmap or whatever you use into some sort of PSI or PI planning, however you want to roll with it. I do believe that that PSI or PI planning is essential, even though it came from SAFe. I think it's fantastic, and that's how teams go from the roadmap and big chunky things that
Yep.
executives want, like, we want everything to work like Google Docs, to, like, actually breaking it down into stories that you can go work on.
And there is something, and I don't want to get into it today, but you just made me think of this. There's backlog refinement, and then there's what I call, or what I think of as good old-fashioned release planning. Um, in XP, they did release plan, and it was look ahead at a different level.
Mhm.
It was not refinement-based look ahead. It was sort of road mapping look ahead. It was high level architectural threads. What was it? Story. Jeff Patton calls it story mapping. To
Mhm.
me, is a release planning activity, and you can look at it in sprints and things, and really rough sizing. It's if you were using t-shirt sizing, this would be like this would be Bob Galen sized t-shirts as opposed to very small t-shirts. Uh, I think if you're doing both of those things to me are refinement activities, maybe at a macro and then a lower level.
Yeah.
And what I said is if you're doing that release planning, I think you can have a tight, consistent loop on the other side. I think there's multiple levels of the planning
Yes. Yeah.
that can happen.
Yeah, I track it too. There's 3 horizons of planning that has to get done,
Yeah.
and they all are executed the exact same way, but the units of measure are different.
Yeah.
Be it time and or how you size things. The units of measure are different, but you're still doing the same thing. You're still refining the next 2 to 3x, whatever that unit of measure is, be it quarters, be it months,
Yep.
be it
Yep.
whatever, you still have to do that. And that creates this nice, I don't know of a better word than like waterfall flow of like breaking things down where as it travels down the water flow, it starts as this like giant boulder, but it tumbles down and it ends up in smaller rocks or pebbles that now are consumable. And but it has to start at the top. And if you skip a step, you're going to end up with a boulder at the bottom. And then what are you going
Yep.
to do? Right?
Yep.
It's still you're back to that just in time planning.
I do you remember? I don't know if you remember it because I'm not sure how you were looking at the Agile community, but there was something called, and it still exists. People don't talk about it as much, called the Agile planning onion. Do you remember that metaphor? If you did a Google search for Agile planning onion, you're going to get all of these graphics,
Yeah.
and it talks about high level to low level execution and planning, and it even gets Josh. Get ready, drum roll, please. It even gets into tasking. at the at that it even gets but it's useful for everyone who's listening to go look at that, but it really is a nice picture of what we're talking about. And agile planning isn't just at the micro level, it's not just at the backlog level. Doesn't mean you have to spend all this time planning, but there's like work flows down to decomposition and understanding and things like that, and there's a flow to that. I don't think you just work at one level, and we're talking about that.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about uh, let's another thing that gets interesting is entry point. What does something look like that you bring into refinement? Is it a
Oh,
story with just a title or a
oh,
description, or
yeah.
what other things should you have that will lead towards healthy refinement that will then start to generate that culture that ultimately, you know,
Yep.
expresses the culture and how it respects product? I think there's a whole lot as things come in. Again, as the newly labeled product guy, I'm gonna have to like make a hat or something.
But you're astuteness. This is an astute question or point. I love the way you've evolved. What a
Mm,
partner. We're
yeah.
we're becoming quite a team over time. So I'm gonna characterize it this way. Do you have fully cooked so does a product owner bring in fully cooked stories, to the team for refinement, or do they bring in crappy stories to the team? Ill-defined stories, crappy, sort of a hodgepodge, a headline, and that's about it. It might look like this. Which one? And that's the entry. So what enters the process? I talk about bringing crappy stories in. I actually think there's an anti-pattern where a lot of product owners in the world, and I've seen this over and over again, they're overwriting, they're
Yeah.
over-investing, they're overdeveloping, and their hearts, they're not bad. Their hearts are in the right place. The other thing is the teams are making very often the teams are making them do it. The teams push
Yes.
back.
Yes.
It's not good enough. We can't estimate that. It has to be 8,000 words or whatever. And so there's a dynamic there. And I'm like, no, don't succumb to that. Bring crappy stuff and then flesh it out together. So I want to hear your view because you're the product guy, but I think that entry point is really important. What's your perspective on that?
I think it was you at some point in my evolutionary journey into productism. I think you threw out a 70% number, and I latched onto that, and that stuck with me of having a story 70-ish percent ready. So there's a headline, there's a description. I don't get too hung up on the whatever the words are of, I want so that blah blah blah. Like I don't get really hung up on that. There are people that say like that has to happen, and a base level of AC. And the value that I find that comes with that is it gets us to the questions that matter faster. We don't have to spend a lot of time getting on the same page about what the heck this means. We can all relatively quickly consume those things that are there, knowing it's not complete, but we at least are on the same page about what that is. What I find and a lot of waste that I see when it's just a title is you end up spending some number of minutes just unifying everybody on what the heck this means because there's times where it's often pretty complex.
I want to react to Rock Bar. He said something and it's making me think. And almost ask for some clarification. It sounds like you both are not that comfortable with uncertainty and haven't seen. I have seen impact mapping. I don't know about us. I have not. I'm not familiar with opportunity solution trees in action. I've seen impact mapping in action. There may not be a lot prepared in the next 2 or 3 units of time. So let's say the next 2 or 3 sprints. So dealing with tremendous. I think the question is dealing with tremendous uncertainty uh, for sprint execution, right? If it's the next 2 or 3 days versus the next 2 or 3 execution units, I'm not clear on, but I'm going to
Mhm.
assume it's the next 2 or 3 sprints. Um, I think it's less. So one reaction I have, and Rockmar, please clarify based on what we're talking about, so you can narrow us in. One reaction is, yeah, I do. So me personally, Bob Galen, I have an uncertainty tolerance, right? As a project manager, as a human being, etc. As a coach, I coach towards dealing with uncertainty, right? Dealing with ambiguity. So I have to have an outside. So I have an internal shell. I have an internal self that's somewhat uncomfortable, and an outside self that tells that internal shell to shut up and just deal with it. The one thing I wanted to bring, Rockbar, is what we think doesn't matter. You have an organizational uh, you have to determine what your organizational tolerance is for uncertainty. I think is another factor. A lot of times when we're talking about backlog refinement and execution, it's for the team, but it's also for your ability to communicate goals and milestones and roadmaps externally. And saying, read the, look at the impact map or look at the mind map may not be good enough for your board. All I'm saying is it's not just the teams. So uncertainty has multiple layers in my mind as well that you have to consider. So the team may have to actually try to create more certainty by doing more work because of the organization wants that. Josh, I rambled there to get more feedback. Go ahead.
Two things in response to the diversion that Robert allowed us to dive into. Robert. I disagree with something Bob said in that you have to look at the organization's tolerance for uncertainty. I know a decent amount of us on this live stream set that comfort with uncertainty by the roles that we're in or what we're hired to do. Uh, there's a level of uncertainty that is in place, whether intentionally or not. Often, when you get brought in to be a coach, whether you're an outside consultant or an internal coach, there's a level of uncertainty that is in place. Again, whether it happened on purpose or not, it's there. And a lot of what I've found coaching that I have to do is around uncertainty. And what I find most consistent is that there's an unstated level of comfort with uncertainty. They don't like it. They don't know why they're in a situation where they can't plan, or anything that they do plan ends up 5 times longer than they thought. They want to be better, but they don't know. And it's that level of uncertainty that they've accepted. They have not put their foot down and said, like, this is not working. This is intolerable. We are going to drive towards more certainty in what we're doing so that we can actually deliver something with confidence and be proud of our work and be proud of the the effort and toil that everybody puts into this, because it's never a question of care or give a shit or effort. That's always there. It's just like, daggone, like we can't make a freaking shot. So guess what? Let's move closer to the hoop instead of getting further away. There's so many people that just like take steps back. It's like, no, let's get more certain about things we're going to hit, and let's walk into that key in basketball and like, hey, guess what? It's a lot easier to make a 3-foot shot than a 30-foot shot. So let's just do that. And I think to get to the space that Rock Bar is talking about, I think that's possible, but I think it's possible with a really mature team and a really mature product that you can respond like that. And unfortunately, not many places operate like that. So that might be an ideal state that people can get to or aspire to get to. But I think the painful and harsh reality for most folks that are out there, that doesn't exist yet. And trying to do that would be like ruinous.
I mean, Rockmark followed up. I'm not disagreeing with anything you said, Josh. He said backlogs do not need to be that deeply defined under some ways of working. That's a key to me. And
Yeah.
it just triggered in me, well, there's different ways of working. If I'm in a Kanban styled environment working on an IT support team, then and my definition of ready for those items is going to be very light, well then we may have small ad hoc backlogs. And I'm like, absolutely. So there's very team maturity, organizational maturity. The style of working is really important. The work stream that you're working on, the style of work that you're producing are some of those things. So again, that's what I was trying to get at before, when I was debating 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 sprints. It wasn't that I was disagreeing with you, Josh. It's like these magic numbers that we apply
Yeah, yeah.
under all circumstances. We have to that there are no magic numbers. Now, 2 to 3 is a really good number. That's a number that in probably what? A product development context, that's a really safe anchor point.
Mhm.
But then there's the Kanban context where, absolutely deal with it differently. So I think Akbar or Rockbar, I think that thank you for that diversion or for those thoughts.
Okay, so getting back to the topic we were talking about, I tell you what, if you challenge Bob in chat, he cannot he cannot
I cannot resist it.
he cannot let it rest. He's gonna perk
I'm gonna
up.
get I'm gonna perk up. Did I perk up? I perk up, don't I? Yeah.
You're like, "Wait a minute. What
Wait a minute.
what did
What?
what just happened?"
It's like a squirrel. We should have like a little squirrel over there, right? Squirrel.
So getting back to the conversation about stories being ready, I threw out again something I think I learned from Bob probably a decade ago of that 70% being healthy. You seem to like it as a much lower percentage, and I see some waste created by doing that.
70% of what being healthy?
Of
Of
as
clarity of a
of
story?
yeah, of clarity of a story before
That's
you bring
just
it and put it in front of the team.
it varies. I've actually there's a guy, I have a graphic and I've talked about it. Joria Morian is a coach in Canada, and he has this neat little hand drawing. He took a picture of it, and I love it, and it challenged my thinking. So I think 10 years ago, I was anchoring around 70%,
Mhm.
Josh. And what I was really trying to use that number for is it's not 100 because so many
Yeah.
waterfallers are trying to get it to 100. I'm like, stop that. So I went to 70 to make a point more than anything else that you do not have, no longer do you have to mash requirements to 100% clarity. It's actually, you can't do it anyway, but don't do that. Joria talks about actually sprint planning being a refinement activity. And he talks about
Mm.
entering sprint planning at like 30% or something like that of clarity. And which really, when I initially saw it, my hair stood up and I
Yeah,
was
just
really
like
uncomfortable.
mine just did.
Yeah. And then he talks about, and then so having the entire sprint is a clarification exercise. And so this notion of bringing that number down, he's actually lowered I'm like in the 50%. There is no magic number,
Yeah.
but it's less work. We need starting to get comfortable with less clarity and still being able at a team level to sniff the good ones out and to be able to deliver them. And he also reminds me that where like every day in a sprint is a refinement act. Is defining refinement as gaining clarity, right? We should be always focusing on gaining clarity.
Yeah, one of the things that I coach teams to is that refined doesn't mean there's zero question. Again, refine. Watch out, Bob. You good? You can't hide from your camera now. Remember, it tracks you. You were trying to get Bob's coughing, trying to get off camera, but he has a fancy new camera that tracks him wherever he goes. He's trying to get off camera and can't. You all right over there, buddy? Oh, he just turned it off. Okay. Uh, drink that water. Drink that tea. Where was I going? Oh, um, ready for sprint for me does not mean it's 100% defined, but it's pretty darn close. Again, what I coach teams towards is that confidence that I can confidently grab this and start working with minimal questions, and
Yep.
I don't expect big questions to come up, but like we can figure this stuff out as we go. Like we don't have to determine what hex code of blue we're using or something like that. Like we can deal with that. But can I grab this, start working, and as I'm working through it, there's a handful of things that are going to come up, and it's no big deal. I can handle it, and we're fine. So that's what I'm
Y-
looking for.
Do you know what? As I'm thinking about this episode, Josh, it's and we went in. I think we proved one point. If we came into this episode and talked about like a daily stand-up, it would be very static. But look at the nuance that we've been driving off of backlog refinement. We've gone into planning, cyclical planning. We've gone into dealing with uncertainty and things, and all fair game. We've talked about culture. So it is. I think it. I think the proof is in the pudding. It's deeper and richer and different than a lot of other events or activities at the team level.
Yeah.
I think I did a good job. Unfortunately, Josh, I have to run. So, Metacast, give us feedback if you'd like us to. I don't know if there's enough meat on this bone for another whole episode, but there might be some variety. So, if you feel like we landed it, give us some feedback. If you don't think if there's more meat on the bone, then give us some feedback. And we'll dive into part two of this episode.
No, please no. No more
But
French.
other than that, I think we landed it. So from beautiful downtown Cary, North Carolina, I'm Bob Galen.
And from equally beautiful downtown Fuquay-Varina, North Carolina, I'm Josh Anderson.
Shake
And bake.
Take care, y'all.